All right, let's continue on with the Gemara. Hopefully in the zechut of saving a Jewish life, one Jew from causing, God forbid, another Jew to be removed from a ventilator. We should know from these kind of stories, in this zechut maybe the Mashiach can come and we can build the Bet HaMikdash tomorrow instead of sitting on the floor and saying Kinot and reading Eicha. Okay, so continue on with the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa. We see that when he came out of the party, his only venom, his only animosity was towards the rabbis, right? He was towards the rabbis because they sat there and they didn't do anything. And because they were quiet, right? What does that mean? They must have agreed with the way he was treated, right? It was agreed. And we were talking about the fact that woe unto a situation, woe unto a time when the rabbis are afraid to speak up against the people. Right? There's an old saying in English, we don't allow the tail to wag the dog. The dog wags the tail. I'm not saying, God forbid, the rabbi is the dog and tail. I'm saying that the rabbi is the leader. The rabbi is the leader. A congregation, no matter who it is, no matter how much money they have, the bottom line is the rabbi is a spiritual leader. Nothing happens in the shul of any significant value without speaking to the rabbi of the shul, correct? This is how we're supposed to work, right? And terrible situation where a rabbi is afraid to speak up against the rich people because he's afraid of his job or he's afraid of other things, because at the end, after 120 years, Chas v'Shalom, he's going to answer to Hashem all the things he did, and then the things he couldn't prevent the congregation from doing because he was afraid to speak up. Just to tell you, there's one story that my rabbi told me. His name was Rabbi Shahebar. He was coming to a community in South America. And this community, basically, it was a kehillah. He was going to be the rabbi of the kehillah. There were multiple shuls in the kehillah. And they were looking for a rabbi. They were looking, and there was no rabbi of them that was of a stature that could run the entire kehillah. We're talking lots of people. So they wrote to the Sochnut in Israel. And the Sochnut in Israel, after a short period of time, they found a young rabbi with his family who was willing to move from Israel and come to live in this place in South America. And Rabbi Shahebar, that was his name. And he lands in the plane, and all the congregation is there, and the president of the kehillah is there, and they're all greeting the rabbi. And the rabbi gets off the plane with his family, comes down on the tarmac, right? And all the congregations are all there, and the president welcomes the rabbi, shakes his hand, gives him a hug, and says, "Rabbi, we've been waiting for you for such a long time. Thank you very much. We're so happy you're here." And the rabbi turns to the president and says, "I have one question for you." "Rabbi, please, any question. What do you have?" "Do you have a mikveh?" The president starts to say, "Well, we've been collecting, we've been thinking about it, we're working on it, we're trying, whatever." The rabbi says to the president, "Okay, I understand. I'm going to go back on the plane. Call me when you have a mikveh." My understanding is the mikveh was built in 3 to 6 months, and that rabbi ruled that kehillah for 40 years, and nobody lifted a finger in that kehillah without talking to the rabbi. Right? So at the end, the person has to have Yirat Shamayim, has to be more afraid of God than he is afraid of the rich guy. Why didn't the rabbi speak up? They were afraid. Maybe they were afraid this rich guy would take vengeance, right? But they didn't realize that not speaking up was going to, Chas v'Shalom, at least in Bar Kamsa's view, he was going to cause something to happen that was even worse. Okay? Izil echul behe kurza be malcha. So what does he do? He's going to go and he's going to spread slander against the rabbis in the royal palace, which means this guy, Bar Kamsa, was politically connected. Generally, people who are wealthy are also politically connected, right? This is Rome. How did you get Roman citizenship? You bought it, right? You had to have money, right? So this guy, I'm not sure he was a Roman citizen, but clearly he had connections, right?
In the US, I think it's like $1,000.
Yeah, maybe it costs more in Rome, I don't know. Anyway, so what happened? $1,000 is nothing, all right? Medicaid costs more than $1,000 that you get when you're a citizen. Okay. So it says, what's he going to do? He's going to go and he's going to inform on the rabbis to who? To the Roman government. Now we know the time. This is around the time of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, right? This is around the year 66, presumably 67. this is a time of very, very difficult time, because the Romans were ruling, and they were not ruling pleasantly, and there were many Jews who were thinking about overthrowing Rome. There were zealots, as we read later on in this Gemara. We're not going to get that tonight. Don't worry about that. Okay? And they were, a lot of craziness going on, and the Romans were very powerful, and they were looking to put down any rebellion. So by he going and spreading slander is going to, God forbid, cause a lot of trouble to the Jewish people. So what did he do? Azal amal el Caesar. He went and he spoke to Caesar. Okay? Caesar is a Caesar. Now some would say he didn't really speak to Caesar because Caesar's in Rome. He may have not had that kind of connections, okay? But basically he spoke to the representative of Caesar that was in Judea at the time, the Roman procurator. Okay? He went to the head, the most important Roman citizen in charge of where they were in Judea. And what does he do? Mardu bach Yehudaeh. The Jews have rebelled against you. Now, the Romans were very, very nervous about rebellion. We talked a couple classes ago about the punishment for sedition in Rome, in Roman times, was crucifixion, right? If you claimed to be a king, you were crucified. That was a horrible, horrible, torturous punishment that the Romans dished out only for people who committed sedition against the country, against Rome. So by him saying, Mardu bach Yehudaeh, meaning Caesar, of course, is going to say, whoa, what's going on? He's going to investigate the situation. Amarle, so Caesar says, Mi emar, who says so, right? Which means, tell me, you're saying they rebelled? Prove it. How can you prove it? Amarle, he said to Caesar, remember, this is a guy, Bar Kamsa, a little bit of information is very, very dangerous, right? He says, Shadar lehu kurbana, send a korban, send a sacrifice, right? We know in the temple, Gentiles are allowed to send sacrifices, and we're allowed to burn those sacrifices. A Gentile is permitted to bring a korban olah. The entirety goes in burned, right? A Gentile is not allowed to bring korban shlamim. That's only for Jews, right? But a Gentile is permitted to be korban olah. So, of course, Bar Kamsa knows that, and he tells Caesar to send a sacrifice to the temple, right? All the ancient world, they respected the temple, okay? They respected the service there. So what happened? Send an animal as a sacrifice. Hazit I mikaravin le, and see whether or not the Jews will sacrifice this animal, because technically, according to Jewish law, it is permitted to sacrifice the animal of a Gentile, right? If they won't sacrifice the animal, if they will choose to violate the law, that would be a proof what? That they're rebelling. Azar shadar biadeh eglat tilata. Caesar sent a fine calf with Bar Kamsa to bring it to the temple as a sacrifice. And of course, he sent something that was a perfect sacrifice. I mean, it had no blemishes in it, because even the Gentiles would not sacrifice an animal with a blemish. So Caesar knew, since the Gentiles, of course, had sacrificed themselves, exactly what type of animal would be would require to be sacrificed in the temple. Badek dekate, as he was going to Jerusalem, shada be muma beniv sifatayim. Bar Kamsa caused a mum, a blemish, a defect in the calf's upper lip. Why the calf's upper lip? Because the Gentiles don't consider that to be a blemish. Right? If an animal has a fractured arm, if an animal has a hole in its head, this is considered to be a blemish. But an animal that has a problem with his lip, the upper lip, this is not considered to be a blemish under Gentile law. Under Jewish law, however, it certainly is a blemish. Why in the lip?
Or are you asking when another?
Well, there's another opinion if someplace else he'd give the blemish, but why would he put it in the lip? What is the symbolism of the lip?
Because the rabbis didn't speak up.
Good. 1, 2. What causes sinat hinam?
Lashon Hara.
Right. And what's unique about Lashon Hara?
What do you mean unique?
There's something unique about Lashon Hara.
In what context?
Okay, there's three different types of forbidden speech. One is Lashon Hara, one is Rechilut, and one is Motzi Shemra. Right? Rechilut is gossip. You know what happened here, you know what happened here, oh my God, you know what happened here, right? Publicizing things that are the truth, but there's chatter. What is Lashon Hara?
Telling
Something that is embarrassing to the person that is true. Motzi Shemra is slander. That's a lie. Okay? If you think about American law, slander is against the law. If a person slanders another person, he can sue that person for damages, right? And collect money. Collect money for slander. You cause me embarrassment, you cause me humiliation, and slander is against American law, just like it was against Roman law. What is the defense if a person wants to say, yo, I didn't slander you? What is the defense of slander? It's true. If what you said is true and you can prove it's true, that is not considered to be slander. And therefore, that is considered to be permitted speech.
well, for us it's not.
But for Jews, Lashon Hara is forbidden speech. That is unique. I'm not aware of any law amongst non-Jews that forbids you to speak about something that is true. So we see the lip that was only a blemish for the Jews and not a blemish for the Gentiles represents Lashon Hara. And Lashon Hara is the sin that is the source of Sinat Hinam.
I agree with that.
It's also when a person speaks Lashon Hara, then there's Sinat Hinam. Okay? Or, Amrele Bedukin Shiba'in. Some say he gave him a blemish in his eye. Why the eye? Why the eye? Okay. The rabbis are called Einei Ha'edah. They're called the eyes of the congregation. Right?
And they were closed.
In the Torah, they're called the eyes of the congregation. Here, meaning, what did he said? He said that the rabbis closed their eyes to what was a travesty. Right? That's one answer. Another answer is what? It says in the Torah, והשוחד יעבר עיני חכמים ויסלף דברי צדיקים. Bribery. What does it do? It causes blindness to the sages. Now, Chas v'Shalom, I'm not saying that they took bribery. But what are we saying when they're more afraid of someone who's rich than they are of Hashem?
The money is blinding.
The money is blinding them. And that's another reason why the blemish was placed in the eye of the animal. Once again, a blemish that would not allow the Jewish people to sacrifice it on the altar.
Is there one that also holds it the ear? Because I was hearing that from someone today.
I don't see that in the Gemara. It might be in one of the commentaries. But that's not in the Gemara. Okay? If it's in the ear, you can learn out because the person who was supposed to hear didn't listen too well. Or that the people weren't listening too well about what the Torah says, right? Shema Yisrael, right? Anyway. Duchta delididan havamuma. But either way, whether the blemish was placed in the animal's lip or whether the blemish was placed in the animal's eye, nevertheless, what does that mean? It was placed in an area where it would be a blemish for the Jewish people and not be a blemish for the Goyim. The animal was brought to the temple, and what do they see? The Caesar sent to sacrifice, and lo and behold, that sacrifice has a blemish. What's the halakha? You cannot sacrifice a blemished animal on the altar. Savur Rabbanan likruve. The rabbis, now, whether these are the same rabbis or different rabbis, I don't know. Maybe they're the same, maybe they're not the same. They wanted to accept the sacrifice. What's against halakha? How could they accept it? Mishum shalom malchut, to maintain peaceful relations with the Gentiles, which means what? Well, if we don't accept the sacrifice, they recognize this could be a pikuach nefesh situation. If we don't accept the sacrifice from Caesar, and they knew exactly who brought it back, it was Bar Kamsa. So therefore, they were afraid that what would happen? That the Caesar would think that the Jews are rebelling and Jewish people would die. And there's no question about it. To bring a blemished sacrifice on the altar is permitted for pikuach nefesh.
So what was the?
So the rabbis wanted to bring the sacrifice. Amar lehu Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas. Rabbi Zechariah, and who was this Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas? This was the head of the Sanhedrin. And according to the many of the Mefarshim, he was at the party. And if he was the head of the Sanhedrin, and he was at the party, why didn't the rest of the rabbis speak up?
Because he didn't speak up.
Because he's the one that has to speak up. Right? A person, if he has a rabbi that's has more wisdom, he's not allowed to speak in front of him. Right? So therefore, if this rabbi was there and he was the head of the Sanhedrin, no one would have spoke up. So the rest of the rabbis might have been justified by being quiet because they were waiting to see what he would say. And since he didn't say anything, they didn't felt it was their place to say anything. So this Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, what does he do? He says, Yomru ba'aleh mumin krevin legabe mizbeach. We can't bring the sacrifice. Why can't we bring the sacrifice? Because people will say that a Baal Mum, an animal that has a blemish, is permitted to bring on the altar. Meaning, he was being machmir, he was being stringent. He was saying people are going to see something, right?
Yes, but how does that? I mean, it should never override pikuach nefesh.
That is correct. Or maybe he didn't hold it was a pikuach nefesh situation. The real tragedy here is what he was worried about was meaningless. Why? Because the temple was destroyed soon after this. And there were no more sacrifices.
Yes, and also
For 1949 years.
and counting.
And counting. Okay? So we see that even though he was concerned that people would think Baal Mum is brought on the altar, no one would end up thinking that. Why? Because the temple got destroyed. Perhaps if he would have saved the temple, that would have been something they would have to teach everybody. Okay? So now the rabbis come up with another solution. Okay? Think about the logic of this. We can't sacrifice the animal because people are going to think that you're allowed to bring an animal with a blemish on the altar. So therefore, let's do what? Let's kill Bar Kamsa. Now, from a halacha point of view, they could kill him. Why are they allowed to kill him?
Because he's trying to kill them.
He's a moser. And the halacha for a moser, for a person who's willing to slander other Jews into the government, kol hahorgo harezeh meshubach. Whoever kills him first is praiseworthy. Right? So, but they didn't have to come to killing him. All they had to do was bring the sacrifice on the altar, and it wouldn't have had to come to the situation. His whole plot would have failed because they would have brought the sacrifice to the altar. Caesar would never have thought the Jewish people were rebelling, and his entire Mesirah was gone. The reason why they had to worry about his Moser, his Mesirah, is why? Because they refused to bring the sacrifice because people shouldn't think that you're allowed to bring sacrifices that have a blemish.
Question, it's based on the thing I circled. Why Rabbi Yochanan doesn't say like you though? He says it's because he did not kill Bar Kamsa. That's why it happened, not because he didn't put the.
No, he says Akamsa or Bar Kamsa, which means this entire incident. There are multiple problems, but it's the coalescence of all of these things together that destroyed the Beit HaMikdash.
Because he was there at the banquet also.
Okay, because what's the real issue? How could there be a situation where Jews hate each other so much that this incident would happen? And so why is it Kamsa Bar Kamsa? Why isn't it just Kamsa's problem? Bar Kamsa's problem. Why does it say a Kamsa Bar Kamsa? What did Kamsa do? We asked that question before, right? What did Kamsa do?
Didn't speak up.
What was he supposed to do?
Well,
He's friends with the rich guy. He's not at the party. He wasn't invited,
he could
right?
have gotten the rich guy to say sorry.
But beforehand, he should have recognized, if he's so friendly with this rich guy, why didn't he work to try to bring shalom ben adam lehavero? A Jew, when he sees two Jews that are fighting with each other, and one of the Jews is his good friend, what should he do? He should go to that Jew and say, come on, do you really want to be fighting with this guy? Let me help you to make peace. Let me get him help to make shalom. But there's no indication whatsoever that Kamsa involved himself in the Gavra's relationship with Bar Kamsa. And one can say, if they were really good friends, Kamsa and the Gavra, he should have made an attempt to intervene and to stop this hatred, because if he would have stopped the hatred, the entire story would never have happened.
So this is really a culmination of both actions and inactions.
Correct.
That all revolve around
Correct. And here we're going to see now inaction, which allowed this to go to the point of destruction. The inaction of the rabbis at the party and the inaction of the rabbi here. Even though Rabbi Yochanan doesn't blame the rabbis here, okay, he says Akamsa Bar Kamsa, but this whole event, one can say Rabbi Yochanan is not saying that it was Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. He's saying this entire story. You can find issues with the entire story everywhere here, and these are problems. Every one of these is a problem. And it shows how defective spiritually the Jewish people were in the time of the temple, and still are today, because if this kind of stuff was not going on today, the temple would be built. And that's why we study this Gemara today. Because by learning this Talmud, by learning this Gemara, we learn why the temple was destroyed, and it should make a person, because what's the whole idea of fasting? The whole idea of fasting is a person is supposed to wake up and do teshuvah, recognize mistakes, and try to fix them. And the mistakes here we're supposed to recognize and try to fix them amongst our people. So of course they bring the suggestion, since they're not going to sacrifice the animal, let's kill Bar Kamsa, totally permitted according to Jewish law because he's a Moser, right? And who's going to go tell the Romans we didn't do the sacrifice? We decide we're not going to sacrifice the animal. Who's going to go tell the Romans we didn't do the sacrifice? There's only one person who's going to tell them. Bar Kamsa. If we kill him, what's going to happen? He can't tell anything. Dead men tell no tales. Amar lahu Rabbi Zechariah. What did Rabbi Zechariah say? Yomru. People are going to say, Matil mum bakodashim yehareg. People are going to make a mistake, and they're going to think that if a person puts a mum, a blemish, in an animal, he deserves to die. Now, first of all, they knew from this that Bar Kamsa put the mum in the animal.
Right, so who cares? Let him think it. It's not killing anybody.
This was the leader, and his opinion carried weight, even though his opinion was wrong.
And gravely wrong.
And Rabbi Yochanan interrupts the rest of the story, because remember, he said there were three reasons, three issues, three tragedies, right? He's only described the first tragedy. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Anvat tanuto shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas, the tolerance displayed by this Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas in refusing to have Bar Kamsa put to death, Hechriva et beitenu, destroyed our temple, V'sarfat hechalenu, and burned down our sanctuary, V'iglitanu me'atzenu, and we were exiled from our land. So Rabbi Yochanan interrupts to say what? That really, the Kamsa Bar Kamsa, these were not the smartest people in the world, right? We've already said that there's no indication that Bar Kamsa was a Talmid Chacham. Most likely Bar Kamsa was a Amaretz because he hated the Chachamim. There's no indication that the Gavra was a Talmid Chacham. We don't know much about Kamsa, but I can't imagine he was much of a Chacham either. But clearly the Chachamim, the rabbis that were there were Chachamim, and this tolerance of this false sense of Chumrah, right? Now really, how did he make such a mistake? How did the rabbi make such a mistake? We look at this story and we say to ourselves, what? Really? This was one of the great rabbis of Jerusalem at the time? How can you make such a mistake? And the answer is simple. When the people are not behaving properly, Hashem blinds the eyes of the Chachamim, so even their Torah cannot protect the people.
So then, why does Rabbi Yochanan blame him for it?
Because he's trying to say that this blindness that he had was what caused the destruction of the temple. Why did he have this blindness? Because of the depravity of the people. And that's why we learn by Moshe Rabbeinu, when Moshe Rabbeinu was old, right? It says that he was as strong and vigorous as he was when he was young, right? Lo chata ne'eno velo nas lecho, right? His mouth was not dry and his eyes were not dim. Yet, it says, when Moshe Rabbeinu tells Yoshua and tells the people, he can't come and can't go. He can't go in, right? He can't go, can't come in. What does that mean? You would think, Ben me'av esim shana anochi hayom. Today I'm 120 years old, the day he's going to die, right? Lo ochal latzef elavo. I can't go and I can't come. So by the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning of the pasuk says that I'm 120 years old today and I can't go and can't come, that must mean he was too weak to go and come. But it can't be. Because we know at the end of Mizot Beracha, what does it say? It says in Mizot Beracha that Moshe Rabbeinu was strong and vigorous. What does it mean he can't come and can't go? He no longer has permission from Shamayim. In other words, the people didn't deserve Moshe to be their leader anymore. And here, because Hashem had already decided, based on the behavior of the people, that the temple was going to be destroyed, he even blinded the eyes of the Chachamim so they would give bad advice, which contributed to the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash.
You said that Rabbi Zachariah was also there at the banquet. So he gives reasoning for all of his other decisions. Where's his reasoning for that one?
Reasoning for?
Why he was silent. I mean, that could be just what allowed him in particular to be blinded, because there were other Chachamim saying,
if he was the greatest Chacham, they would all wait to see his opinion. But clearly what happens is Hashem blinded him at the party, so he didn't speak up. Or maybe he had more fear of the retribution of the rich guy than he did of Shamayim. That's why he brings the pasuk from the beginning, Ashrei Adam mefahed tamid, right? But anyway, so we see that, and this kind of stuff, inviting people, not inviting people to a party, hating one, loving another one, this is today. Congregants speaking up against the rabbi because they have money, thinking that they have a say in what goes on. Rabbis who are afraid to speak up against the congregation because they need their parnasah, because Baruch Hashem, they have lots of children, and they're afraid if they lose their job, they're going to have a difficult time making a living. Congregations who force rabbis to do things they don't want to do because they have money. That's the story here. And the sinat chinam, and the baseless hatred that goes on between Jews. In the zechut of studying this story, we'll continue this Gemara tomorrow. In the zechut of studying the story of Kamsa bar Kamsa, may we all try to protect ourselves from sinat chinam and try to love all fellow Jews, avat chinam, with baseless love other Jews for no reason, for free, for no good reason. Try to dispense the sinat chinam, avoid Lashon Hara, and Bezat Hashem, Beit HaMikdash will be built speedily in our days, the Mashiach will come, and all the world will recognize that V'haya bayom ahu yeh Adonai echad u'shmo echad. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen v'amen.